Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. In the early 19th century, a 13-year-old boy was kidnapped by Muslim Fulani tribesmen from his home in Yoruba land, what is now part of course, modern Nigeria. Actually, as I just tell you about that, that's depressingly familiar because even today, Fulani tribesmen, Muslim Fulani tribesmen are still attacking people and are persecuting Christians and destroying churches in Nigeria. But this boy was kidnapped in the early 19th century. His name was Ajayi. And he was traded then on. They sold him on as a slave into other people's, and he got traded 4 or 5 times until he ended up being transported on a ship by Portuguese slave traders who were going to take him across the Atlantic to America, where he would labor as a slave and most likely would have died there. Probably, given the history of so many young boys that were taken out there, would have died at a very early age, having lived a totally miserable and enslaved life. However, the Portuguese traders' ship was intercepted by a British Royal Navy squadron. Because at that time, because not only had Britain outlawed the slave trade throughout the British Empire as a result, of course, of Christians like William Wilberforce campaigning, but also they were now patrolling the seas of Africa and stopping and searching ships from other countries and setting free any slaves that they found. And they found young Ajayi along with other slaves in the hold of this Portuguese ship. And so they took him and the others to Sierra Leone. Now, Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone, is called that because it was designed to be a place of freedom for people who had previously been slaves. And that was why the whole colony of Sierra Leone was set up. It was to be a place of freedom for those who had once been enslaved. And so young Ajayi ended up there with other boys of a similar age who had also been enslaved, and he started attending a school run by the Church Missionary Society. And there, when he was at that school, he heard the gospel and he gave his life to Jesus Christ. And he took a new name upon his baptism. And one of the founders of the Church Missionary Society was a man called Samuel Crowther. So young Ajayi took upon himself the new name of Samuel Crowther. He proved to be a very intelligent and gifted student, and eventually he actually went to England and studied at a CMS school in England. Eventually he was ordained as a minister in the Church of England, and eventually he was able to return as a missionary to his own country in what was absolutely unique, because at that time missionaries were Europeans. And if any Africans went with them, it would be as helpers or to carry stuff or servants or something of that nature. But young Ajayi, who is now called Samuel Crowther, went with a group of other Africans from Sierra Leone and went back to the Yoruba people and began to preach the gospel. He turned out to be a Bible translator. He translated the Bible into the Yoruba language. And eventually he was consecrated as a bishop in the Anglican Church, the first ever African to be consecrated as a bishop in the Anglican Communion. Samuel Crowther, Ajayi as he had been, ended up giving his life serving his own Yoruba people by sharing Jesus Christ with them. A boy whose life was just lost in slavery ended up becoming a pioneer for the gospel and a great figure in the history of Nigerian Christianity. When you see what God has done in the church in Nigeria today, we should thank God for young Ajayi, for Samuel Crowther. But you know what? He's just one example, now a spectacular example, but he's just one example of how God will take those of us who are enslaved. Those of us who are enslaved might be literally, it could be to habits, it could be to lifestyles that are contrary to the gospel. God takes those who are enslaved and he brings freedom, but he doesn't just bring freedom, he brings significance. He enables our lives to count for something. Samuel Crowther is an example of that. May our lives too be an example of those who God took from a place of slavery to a place of significance in Jesus' name. May God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.